And we are live. Welcome everybody to the Design Advisory Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, December 8th, 2021 at 4:35. I'm going to call the meeting to order. First thing I'd like to do is go through everybody and have them turn on their camera and just say whether or not they are present or not. Go one at a time, starting off with Tom Gribben.
Tom Gribben. Yes.
Tom's here. He's having a little bit of trouble with his audio. Next up, Jesse.
I said, hello, Ted. Yes, I'm alive, coming through. Still alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse, you're up.
Yes, also present.
Present. Alex.
Present.
Alex Krawchuk. Jonathan Lampier.
Present.
Sarah McDonald.
I'm here.
Nancy Solomon. Nancy, not present yet. She is expected to attend. Elizabeth Berry. Elizabeth, not present yet, but she is expected to attend. Christina Verissimo has sent her regrets. Nicholas Robbins. Nicholas? No response. Sujana? No. Okay, so we're still, there's a few people who might join us late, and we do have quorum, so we're going to get down to business here. The first order of business is item number 2, approval of the minutes from our last meeting on November 10th, 2021. Did anybody note any errors or omissions from the meeting minutes? See, Tom says no. Sarah, do you have something?
I mean, as it's phrased, no. I just thought that they were very scant for the amount of discussion that we had. So I understand that they're not verbatim. But if someone, a member of the public, was catching up and reading the minutes, I don't think that really captured what we were saying. Now, forgive me, I'm not going to spend an hour and a half going through the video online and writing minutes for it. But I guess maybe we could reflect that in the minutes.
Yeah, would you like to maybe make a suggestion on like anything to add?
I don't even know. It's just very, very scant. So.
Scant. Yeah, I agree.
From the municipal clerk's office perspective, the minutes are following that of regional council and they are action based. So because you had no planning cases before you and then really no recommendations, it was the minutes followed an action based procedure. So what was being to be captured was motions and things like that. So if you have any suggestions, certainly bring them forward. And I guess that's the thing. It is there is a YouTube available if people, the public are able to listen to that.
Ted, I know I said I had no comments because I thought they were very, like Sarah, they were very minimal. And I would suggest that there were actions because quite a few of us on the committee said we would not retire or retire from the committee until we heard what the presentation that was to come today. To see what would the role be of this committee under package B. There was a lot of dissatisfaction in the discussion. So I would say for Jill, the action was the above is a summary of discussion where the committee, some members of the committee were looking to resign because of the lack of relevance of the committee. And we would wait until the presentation by staff on package B to before further decisions are made. I know I said no comments, and I was thinking this, but I thought I would just let it pass. Do the rest of you agree with that? We were all going to resign. There was talk about resigning because the committee, we couldn't see the relevance of the committee, but we thought we would wait to this meeting to see the presentation from staff to see if we would have a more meaningful role under package B.
Like I'll say that I think most people would say that the minutes don't fully capture what we discussed last time, and I think I would notice in previous meeting minutes they often capture a lot of the back and forth really quite accurately, and this time it was missing. And so if somebody really does want to see, we recommend that they go take a look at the video. But if they're looking at the meeting minutes, they won't know just how much we discussed this. So nonetheless, I do have to call for a motion. So someone can either put a motion on the floor to approve it, or if you're not happy, we could put in a motion to amend it. Those really are our choices, or else there's no motion that goes forward and we don't approve the minutes. So I will call for a motion. Does anybody have a motion to approve the minutes as written or to amend them?
I would propose that we amend the minutes, and I can write something and send it to you, Ted, for approval with the committee, and then we can send it to Jill for the addendum.
Yeah,
That's a suggestion. Seconder for that?
I'll second that, because we can approve these technically at our next meeting, can't we?
Yeah, we still have another December meeting.
we do not have another December meeting.
Do we? I hope.
Here's what, no, we don't. Here's what I would suggest then. If there's enough dissatisfaction from the committee members, I'll say someone make a motion to defer this item to next meeting, and then somebody can come up with appropriate additions to the minutes and we can vote on it at that point.
I'm fine with that if someone's willing to, volunteer. I just don't think it's the role of the committee members to do the minutes, but I understand that it's our role to approve them and, sorry, there's a dog, and make amendments.
Okay.
Your dog agrees, Sarah.
All right, Tom, do you want to do that? You can
Fine.
say I motion to defer. Given
I
that
will
Tom,
pass
you're
the
gonna
motion
vote.
I will pass the motion to defer the minutes until the next meeting, and the committee will write up a suggested amendment to the current minutes.
Okay, motion's on the floor. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Jonathan. I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion to defer approval of the minutes is carried. We'll bring this up again next meeting. Thank you. Okay, the next item is approval of the order of business, approval of additions and deletions. And before we get to that, do we have anybody else who has joined the meeting since we started here? Because we were missing Nancy and Elizabeth, Nicholas and Sujana. They are still not present. In that case, I might suggest that there is a change to the meeting. Yes, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'll ask to defer item 9.1.4, the orientation, because they are not here again. I'll just note that.
That the point is, the item 9.1.4 was supposed to train the new members, Sujana and Nicholas. And if they're not here, there's no training, no need for training. So that's why Jonathan wishes to defer. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Sarah. All in favor? Say aye.
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 I see
Aye.
all kinds of ayes. Opposed, say nay. Okay. So that's 2/3. So the revised agenda carries. And I'll point out, so Nicholas and Christina have both missed this. If they don't show up, there'll be 2 meetings in a row that they miss. And by the bylaw, if you miss 3 meetings in a row that you were off the committee, I will send them a note after this meeting to remind them of that, to make sure that they attend, so they are not kicked off the committee. That takes us to item number 4, business arising out of the minutes. And there are none. Item 5, call for declaration of conflicts of interest. There should be none. I'll do it anyway. Hearing none. Item number 6, consideration of deferred business. There is none. Item number 7, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Okay, Jill, we're going to talk about correspondence, and this really goes as carry on from last meeting with the correspondence from Tom to the committee. And Aaron is here today to discuss it further. So I think we'll just pick up right where we left off, and we'll just go right to Aaron, and then we can carry on a conversation from there.
Yeah, I'd probably defer to the committee. I had responded to Tom tune in November, so I understand at least the majority of the discussion, as we recall it. I can certainly offer my apologies for the delay in getting that back to Tom. I will tell you that it was handed to me by my predecessor in this position, Steve Higgins, in mid-July, and I simply didn't have a chance to turn it around in advance of the July meeting. And August, September, October meetings, there were no cases going forward and the meetings were canceled. So when I saw that the committee wished to meet irrespective of the fact that there were no cases in November, that was my moment then to put the correspondence in front of the committee. So that's sort of, it was a deliberate choice on my part. It never occurred to me that the committee might wish to meet simply over the email, and that's my error. So I apologize for that. As for, I said my piece in the email. So if there's further conversation, I welcome it and happy to respond.
Aaron, thank you. Maybe I'll go to Tom. This was your correspondence, and there's a couple points that came up. So I ask everybody, remember, this is probably the last meeting that we'll go over these items. And so if you have anything that's on your mind, now's the good time to bring these things forward.
Yes, Aaron, thank you very much for the reply. I know it was a new job and Stephen resigned, so it was no problem. Your reply was much appreciated, and there was a lot of thought put into it. I could respond to some of your responses, but I don't think this is the place, and it's not really a give and take item. I thought, Ted, today was the planning staff were going to present the package B information as it relates to the role of this committee. And I don't think, I think my letter and your and Jonathan's letter summarized a concern with the committee members that we were not really dealing with something real. We were almost like a wallpaper, or what's the word, a facade for developers and the planning department, and really, when I look at the latest tracking sheet that we got yesterday or the day before, and so many of the comments were from developers. Well, these comments are outside the land use bylaws, that we're not going to deal with them. So really, it substantiates our concern that we're not really doing anything terribly useful. There were 1 or 2 things that were changed, but we put in a lot of work and a lot of time for 1 or 2 little minor changes. So I was hoping that today we would have a presentation from the planning department and how they were working with this group and the defunct now Sarah's group, the planning review committee, is there a role for us in the package B, and what is that role, and what improvements can we make, or what improvements have the planning department tried to lead us to that would make public involvement, i.e. public meetings and this public involvement, more meaningful. So that's what I was hoping for today, rather than go through this letter point by point, because the letter and your letter was a summary of our issues.
Well, item 9, we are definitely going over package B. We have Ben who's going to do a presentation.
Then I would suggest we, if that's all right with Aaron, that we pass on to package B. Unless there's your and Jonathan's letter to be discussed as well.
No, I don't, Jonathan. Okay, well, I think I'd like to close out the correspondence for your letter, like sort of officially, so we can move on, and then maybe something could be picked up at another time regarding package B. Does anybody else have any thoughts with regard to the correspondence that Tom had and Aaron's response that needed any further discussion at this time? No. Okay, so hearing none, and based on what Tom was saying, then we'll close with the correspondence for that. And I'll say, Aaron, thank you very much for being in attendance. We'll look forward to item 9.1.2 when we're talking about the tracker. And I think you're going to be talking about that then. So let's move on to the next item. Information items brought forward, number 8, there is nothing. So item 9 is reports and discussion. So up next on 9.1.1 is Ben Sivak. Thank you very much, Ben. It's good to see you again. Ben's going to talk about package B, which was approved, and specifically how it impacts the site approval process and the DAC, and what our role will be going forward. I'll turn the floor over to you now, Ben. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and I just apologize for the poor lighting in my office here. HRM's office doesn't have the same lighting I have at my home office. I'm going to share my screen. I have a short presentation. If Jill or Jill also could enable me to share my screen, that would be great. There it goes. Okay. Okay. Now, can you see the? Can you see my slideshow fine now? Yes. Okay. So I'll nod. So as Mr. Chair mentioned, I'm here to give an overview of a package B, and I'm going to just touch on the process and just what the central plan is all about, but really focus in on what the design advisory committee's role and how that's changing under package B, which is now in effect. So committee members may know council has approved it. We sent it to the province for review. They've gotten back to us and ads in the paper. So as of November 27th, it's the law of the land. It's what's being used to regulate development. So just a quick recap for members that the central plan process has been going on for, well, a number of years. You can go back over a decade if you wanted to on the idea of it, but it really started off in earnest in 2015 with a key decision point along the way being the split the process into a package A and a package B process, which there's all sorts of benefits for that, but it also has, it creates some complexities and also a chance to make improvements to the package B process. Through the recent package taken forward to council, generally package B didn't revisit a lot of the difficult decisions council made around the package A, which applied to the high growth areas. Things like height and density, those are largely carried forward under the package B, which incorporated the package A areas. One important change, though, was highlighted in past meetings and the meeting I attended with this group past summer, was a streamlined use of the site plan approval tool. So under package A, the site plan approval tool was used for almost all types of development over a certain size. And the experience with that tool found that it was adding time to the process with and the concerns about the value of it, because it was used to implement requirements that were very prescriptive. There wasn't much wiggle room, it wasn't much shades of gray. And that's what really the site plan approval tool is really intended for. So the through the package B process is really focused on that part of the site plan approval tool, and I'll talk more about that in an upcoming slide. Other than that, there are also some minor changes to the built form and building design requirements, and also some additional package A zone land. So a few more send zone properties and corridor zone properties. For package B, it was fleshing out the rest of the plan. It's all the remaining areas of the center plan, and that was parks and community facility designation, the downtown designation, to pull in the majority of downtown Halifax, although a portion of it needs to remain for the Heritage Conservation Districts, we expect to pull in with another year and a half from now, covering institutional areas, industrial areas, and also water access designation. Together with the approval of package B, it also involved the repeal of the documents that were otherwise in place for the Fraser Regional Center. So I think, as the committee knows, package B built on package A, but also incorporated into it. So this means that package A, previous package A has been repealed because package B replaces it for those lands, and of course builds onto it to fill almost the whole regional center. We've also repealed the downtown Dartmouth plan, the Halifax Peninsula Land Use Bylaw, and amended a number of other documents. And governance, I think, is what this committee probably most wants to talk about. And another component of implementing package B is making some changes to various committees' terms of reference, administrative orders, we call them. With the one that I'll touch on in a bit more detail, the next slide is, of course, updates to the Design Advisory Committee terms of reference, or the AO that sets out the roles and responsibilities for this committee. So I guess this is the key slide that I'll spend a bit of time on for this group, and it sounds like there's been past discussions, and I know I attended in the past in the summer to discuss this as well. But the key changes for a Design Advisory Committee are two bullet points at the top. First of all, the committee now has responsibility for the entire regional center. So instead of just package A lands, which is kind of the Swiss cheese portion of the regional center, it's the entire regional center plan area. So on one hand, the geography is much bigger than it was under package A. The other change, the other important change is related to the site plan approval tool. So the challenge with the site plan approval tool, that it's an all or nothing basket. It's you can't pick and choose the components of the site plan approval tool you want to involve. It has to be the whole piece of it. And for that reason, why we're using that tool to focus on variations only. So it's when a developer or a proposal wants to do something outside what's the prescriptive nature what's in the land use bylaw. If they want to do something different that requires a bit more scrutiny, it's maybe that where public consultation and input by this committee makes sense. That's what the site planner tool is focused on in package B, and that's what council has since approved. And what do I mean by variations? The variations would be different ways of meeting standard land use bylaw requirements, recognizing that there might be some need to provide some flexibility to allow for innovative or unique building design. So some of the items are summarized on the slide, and some of these are actually split out into two variation categories. But these are the items that, in going forward, will be brought forward to the committee. The first one is fairly minor, the roof edge setbacks for height exempted features. That's about how close, different, antennas and things like that could go to the edge of a roof line. That one's probably not. That one probably won't be used that often, but there could be reasons why certain height exempted features. A developer might want to do that where some public consultation and this committee's input would be warranted. Street wall articulation is also another one. As committee may know, in the land use bylaw, there's requirements about about having to articulate every 8 meters. And this variation recognizes that for unique projects, maybe it's more of a curved wall or something different, that there's different ways of meeting the intent of providing an interesting active street building frontage. So that's another option that where developers could choose to apply for a variation to do something different that still carries out the intent of that rule. Similarly, with grade-oriented premises, these are like storefronts or restaurants that front onto a street, and the center plan has a maximum size of that. You can only be so big until you have to have another door, which makes sense for a majority of developments, but not for things probably like grocery stores or other maybe large format retails, which you don't want to say no, never in the regional center. But if a developer wants to do something larger, then they need to articulate and make the storefront, the frontage engaging in a different way using displays or other ways. And again, that would another reason that would the site plan approval tool could look at that a little more scrutiny and bring it to the site plan approval process. Maximum building dimensions, another one I'll mention. So under the central plan Linus bylaw, buildings can only be so big, especially at the ground level. But recognizing again, there's also, whether it's a grocery store or it's a different need for building to be larger, that they can apply for a variation provided that the massing of the building is broken up in a significant way to make it actually look like it's more than one building. And again, not necessarily a black and white rule. It's something that requires some review, and whereas it's where input from this committee and public consultation would have something meaningful to comment on. A big one is also the form and design of institutional community facility uses. There's two variation options based on unique needs and designs, and this is trying to give an option for for developments like places of worships or museums or art galleries that just actually intentionally don't want to do a street wall or something different because they're trying to stand out and be different from the area. So it's not something you can necessarily write rules for, but they would require them to go through their process. So there's some scrutiny of the proposal and to make sure it does still add to the urban design of the city. And the last one is concerns heritage and design. This one's mostly about providing a path forward should there be any conflict between heritage property requirements about preserving the heritage features of a building and land use bylaw requirements. There might be a need to be flexible with the land use bylaw so that doesn't undermine the other requirements related to heritage property. So those would be the variations that are currently in the land use bylaw. And if anything in the years ahead, or you expect perhaps we'll be adding to these as new challenges and unique proposals come forward to provide further flexibility for development. This is where it stands right now with the approval of package B, and it's these potential variations that will be the focus of the site plan approval tool, and therefore also the involvement of this committee going forward. And that's really my summary for you, and I'm here and happy to take any questions for you. The other thing I'll note is that we're preparing the amendments to the needed administrative order, so the terms of reference. They're in our report review process, and we're expecting to take them to regional council for approval in January. So we're at this point where package B is approved, but the terms of reference for this committee and other committees haven't been updated, and that will be resolved early in January. So thank you. I will figure out how to stop sharing my screen and pass it back to the chair. There we go.
Ben, thank you very much for the presentation. So what I think I'd like to do is open the floor and let everybody on the committee feel free to ask the questions that they have of Ben. I've got a few too, but I'll go last. Would anybody like to go first?
I can go first. Just speaking specifically to my particular role on the committee, which is meant to be a member at large with environmental expertise. And I think there are a couple of those positions on the committee. I don't I'm having a hard time understanding where staff see environmental recommendations fitting into those variance categories. And then more broadly, what value someone with my experience will add under the new rules.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question through the chair. Back to you, Jesse. For the variations, I suppose it's the same thinking around the previous approach to site plan approval. For various reasons, whether it's a larger building or difference in design, there might be an environmental component to that. Having said that, I don't know how often that came up in previous previous to site plan approvals requests. So it's a fair feedback, and with a new document and a new approach, it's fair to say there'll be some monitoring of how active this committee is, and whether or not there'd be further changes to the terms of reference for that role is a fair comment.
I'll just finish by saying previously we were able to comment on the landscape plan for all of the proposals, which did often include an environmental recommendation. And I would, without having it off the top of my head, I would say that, in almost everything we reviewed, there has been suggestions made to the landscape plan. So that's disappointing, but I'll leave it there.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. If I could jump in with a little bit, broaden my response a little bit, Mr. Chair.
Yep, we'll have it just free-flowing conversation.
Oh, okay.
Go right ahead.
In terms of landscaping, that's actually that's a critical component on some of those variations. So expanding to have a bigger building, one of the requirements is to have a look like more than one buildings, but also have it broken up by some landscaping or a plaza somewhere in the middle of the building. Similarly with street wall articulation or especially the unique institutional cultural buildings, there are requirements for kind of landscape plazas or open spaces to be part of that. If you're going to do something different and bigger, then having kind of giving back to the public realm through landscaping is a key component of the trade-offs with some of these variations. So some of the items that you've shown interest, I guess, with the other ones that still apply to the variations, just to point that out.
I don't have anything further. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Jonathan next, and then Tom.
Yeah, so I had two questions. The first, there you mentioned the terms of reference, and in our previous iteration, we answered to the development officer and not council. Is that going to change? Because obviously with all the letters that we wrote, we really wanted to be able to address council.
Thanks for the question, and know that part of the terms of reference isn't changing. We don't have any direction from council to make that change.
Okay. The other thing, so as we operated before, it was all very prescriptive, and that didn't work, and that's why everything is changing. So with these variation categories, is it all then subjective? Like you'll present a report with staff's view on it, and then we are completely open to discuss and decide and on what is best, and then we are still a recommendation body. They're not held to whatever we recommend. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct on the second part. The role of this committee to be an advisory, or giving advice to the development officer still remains. I think I'll take a bit more nuanced approach in terms of are these prescriptive, or are they wide open? Well, they can't be completely wide open. That's really only council can play that type of role. So the variation set some parameters. These are some of the minimums and some of the intent that needs to be achieved. But how a developer achieves that, for example, if they're going to do something different with street articulations, how is it doing? How effective is that? There's more gray, or more room for interpretation than the previous prescriptive models, but not going as far as wide open criteria that a councilor might do for a development agreement.
Sure. So
they're
just
kind
to
of in the
say,
middle. I describe them as being a bit in the middle.
yeah, it's not going to be a checklist that we're basically checking off ourselves.
That's not the intent. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No, I'll go to you, Tom.
I have my own questions, but I'm not quite sure, Ben, what your response to Jonathan's request was. Do we follow the LUB when it comes to street front articulation and whatever, as we have done over the past year? Are you saying the LUB restrictions and limitations still apply, or have they all gone now?
Yeah, thanks for the question, opportunity to clarify. So it's a bit of both. So the land use bylaw still includes very detailed design regulations for street wall articulation is a good one. It's a good one to pick on. So we have just those design requirements that every 8 meters of a street wall needs to be varied in some way. But what it also includes in the land use bylaw is what we call site plan variation options. So if a developer, if a designer chooses, they're looking to do something different with street wall articulation that doesn't fit that every 8 meter mold in some way, but still can be demonstrated to meet the intent of activating the street and essentially making the street wall not boring. And the variation would lay out some specific things that the development options committee would look for. Those are the types of things that the developer could apply for, go through the site plan approval process, and then the development officer, the development staff would take that to this committee for comment. Look, the developer has a choice of articulating every 8 meters. They don't have to go through this process, or they're looking to do something quite different for whatever reason. And is that to the satisfaction of the committee? Is that worthwhile to grant a variation to the rules?
It sounds very much like what we spent the last year doing, because one of the big issues was the development officer would see that there was articulation there and would approve it, whereas many members of our committee would say, well, they disagree. There's not enough articulation, especially Jonathan, who was very much into materials and the use of brick and the formulation of things. So as Jonathan said, we respond to the development officer, and one of my concerns was very often the development officer was seeing things that we couldn't see. Anyway, that is that discussion. I have my own questions. I'd like to know, with all of the discussion we've had over the last couple of months on the role of this committee, why our role has been further restricted, and we will only be seeing those site plans that are requesting a variation. And you have listed the variations, and they are quite restrictive. Was there no movement in the planning department to give the public a wider voice, a wider sort of ability to improve design and request improved designs rather than just suggest? I think we've gone backwards with this package B rather than forwards, because if it's only variations that we're now going to review. Do you know?
Thanks for the comment and question. I guess the comment I will add to the discussion is certainly something that council talked about through the committee review process and considered. And I think, as I mentioned in our presentation, the challenge is that we're working with the tools as set out under the HRM charter. So, and involving a committee to comment on proposal cannot be done under the as a right process. It can only be done under different planning tools. So the more involved ones, like the development agreements, take time, but can involve public consultation and committee review. But that's something that certainly council and I was looking to streamline the approval process. It's, I guess, the challenge of the site that the site plan approval tool is the only one you can use to involve a committee with, but it also comes with other challenges, including the opportunity to appeal by residents and a slower process. And the other point I'd make in terms of public consultation, that's something that council is quite aware of, is there's a lot of engagement in package B in setting the rules, making decisions about building heights and other key controls. And the intent is not to revisit some of those items again and again every time a project comes forward, because what we're finding with the site plan approval tool is, while it's narrowly focused on design elements of the building, what neighboring residents most wanted to comment on and appeal to council was the height, was whether or not the proposal should even go forward. And that's something that council very much didn't want to spend time and resources doing, since so much time and effort was put up to the upfront engagement and planning process.
Yeah, yes, I can understand and agree with that. Yeah. There is a good example for our other committee members of the role and then the lack of role of our committee last year. There was a proposal for the corner of Cogswell and Gottingen that one of our members unforgettably called a photocopier. And it was a very, very dramatic corner site at that corner, very dramatic corner. And I think our committee made the strongest design recommendations for the whole year for that building. And I think it was very important. And yet the developer has written back and said, yes, he will continue to look at some of the suggestions. And I think it's a real pity that we have no more clout than that our comments are very, very strong, and to me, worthwhile comments have been just brushed aside. And I think that is the issue that we're fighting with, or we're struggling with here, is that the role of this committee. And I'm sure our chairman remembers well that building and the very strong comments that we made about it. Ben, we're in that huge, the two big volumes. Where can we find this summary that you presented on the role, the new role of the committee? Your slide, your second or third slide, the Design Advisory Committee. Where do you know? Can you hear me, Ben?
Yeah, you were breaking up for me a little bit. I think I got your question. You're looking for a copy of the slideshow. I just
no. Where in the formal documents do we find this the role and guidance for the Design Advisory Committee, i.e. that you summarized in your slides?
Right. Okay. So the details around language around the site plan variations, that's written right into the land use bylaw, and I can email Jill after this meeting to share to point you to the key section number of the land use bylaw.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Well, I think I've said my bit, Ted. So.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah, Alex, do you have comments or questions?
I suppose just, I don't know. I feel like I'm a broken record. So at this point, I think if the committee is, like Tom said, being reduced even further to the, I guess, access we have on commenting on these developments. Yeah, it just really questions why we're having it. So I understand logistically, of course, but I don't know the impact that this will actually have going forward. So that's just what I'm kind of mulling over right now. And I don't really have any questions about it. So.
Okay, thanks. Alex?
I guess I would say that I'm satisfied with the presentation. My understanding is that with the geographic scope being enlarged and the fact that we're moving towards looking at variances rather than just like kind of everything under a certain size of development, I think that actually makes it more meaningful potentially, because we are looking at variances and giving recommendations based on, do we think that these variances meet the intent of the planning documents, which I find that our mandate tended to be, does it meet the language of the planning documents? And we wanted it to be more about, does it meet the intent of the planning documents? And now that's kind of what we're getting. Whether that will play out into, we have more or less influence that is meaningful, I don't know. That's something I guess time will only tell. But in terms of, I feel that there is also an appetite, and I've mentioned this before, that a lot of, I would say a wide portion of this committee would like our decisions to be a bit more binding, whereas I'm comfortable with it being an advisory role. I don't necessarily we can make all the recommendations that we want to developers, but at the end of the day, they don't necessarily have to take them, and I'm comfortable with that myself.
Thank you. Anything else? I got a couple questions, and then Sujanna, so I noticed you joined.
Yes, sorry, I was in a meeting and couldn't join earlier.
Well, that's fine. So Ben's been talking about package B, and he updated us on the terms of reference for package B, which was just passed. And everybody's been asking questions. I'm going to go through my questions, and then I'll let you speak, and then Jesse. So Ben, I seem to recall that before this was going through, that there was going to be a chunk of perhaps downtown Halifax that was going to be carved out for the DRC to continue to have a mandate over for a certain time period, and then it's going to be wrapped up. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, that you have it exactly right. So the majority of downtown Halifax plan has been pulled into the center plan framework. So that part's, part of the center plan and part of this group's mandate in terms of the site plan variation. But because the heritage conservation districts, there's 2 heritage conservation districts that apply in downtown Halifax. Those require a different planning process and actually involve a different minister in the province to get approval for. So it just the logistics of incorporating them in the central plan at the same time just couldn't line up. So that plan remains in place for a smaller area. It's the heritage conservation districts, and actually 5 additional project sites that council pulled out to enable them to continue on over the previous site plan approval process.
So what are those?
That's expected to be
Barrington
pulled
South.
into the, and that's, sorry, I'm almost finished here. That's expected to be pulled into the central plan framework through the downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation Work was looking to pull in historic properties and put them all together under one envelope. And that work's underway, and we're expecting it to come forward to council for a decision in about a year's time.
Okay, so you got the Barrington South, and then you've got, was it Schmidtville?
Old South Suburb.
Old South Suburb. Okay, and then you said 5 other sites?
Yeah, 5 additional project sites. So these are projects that were in progress under the downtown Halifax formal downtown Halifax rules, and had requested that they wanted to still continue under those rules. Some of the key changes were changes to bonus zoning and other items of the framework. And so council agreed to, because they were keeping the downtown Halifax plan alive for another year, was a way of transitioning those projects, was to basically punch holes in the center plan document and have it continue to have those sites and the heritage conservation district still fall under the downtown Halifax plan.
Okay, and those sites are they would all be under the DRC currently, right? Yeah. Okay. Design manual S1 currently used by the DRC to sort of approve all the projects in the DRC areas. What happens to that manual?
Well, that manual is part of the downtown Halifax land use bylaw, and so it continues on for those remaining portions of the downtown Halifax planning area.
And once the DRC is wrapped up into the DAC, does it go away or does it still apply to those areas?
Now, once the plan is for the remaining portion of the downtown Halifax plan to be ultimately repealed, including the design manual, and instead and have the center plan framework apply to all the lands.
Okay. In design manual S1, I always liked section 3.4.1, which was one of the few like subjective areas where you could apply higher levels of architectural obligations on the developer for prominent visual termini and for prominent civic frontage. Is there any, once that goes away, is there any areas where you'll have that sort of subjective higher hurdle for developers in the center plan?
Thanks for the question. I'm not intimately familiar with that section, so I might be misunderstanding what you're getting at. But I would just note that I think related to this would be that the central plan identifies a number of what we call view terminus sites. So that's sites that were some enhanced kind of design controls are put in place, and then it's also perhaps related to that is also some of these variations I was talking about, where some flexibility is provided the design potentially provides more at-grade open space or does other features to contribute to the surrounding. So an example would be like some sort of art gallery or a museum that wanted to do something, didn't want to have a street wall at all, but might for various reasons, but would need to have high quality designs in a different way.
That's one of the variances, right? So if they want to change the articulation, then there's an obligation for them to do something better. Something that the people of Halifax would really like, if I paraphrase. Am I on the right track?
Yes. That's one of my.
Is that written in sort of like a subjective way where different people could come up with their own interpretations? Most of these variances that are in the DAC manual they're actually fairly prescriptive. Like this, you either look, anybody looking at it will come up with the same determination on whether or not it meets the criteria for being accepted as a variance. Will it be written in a more subjective way?
As I answer, I think it's the intent is to try to be in between kind of a more wide open thing, something that council would decide, but less prescriptive than the standard land use bylaw requirement. So, but there is some guidance to it, and I think perhaps the best thing to do is, in response to Tom's question, is pointing to the exact language of the variations. So you can see for yourself what how much wiggle room there is and how much room for interpretation there is. And I'd say I certainly note that yes, that the variations under package A were in some places so prescriptive that we moved that flexibility just into a standard land use bylaw requirement. For example, in sloping conditions was one that we're able to write. It was either sloping or not, and you could define what that meant. And that could be transferred into a standard land use bylaw requirement instead of a variation.
And is the verbiage already written for that and it's been approved, or is that something that's still going to be written afterwards?
No, it's part of the approved now approved package B land use bylaw, so it's in effect, and so it's something that we can point you to, and it is a test to see how this works, how much interest in these variations, and how they work going forward in the coming months.
Okay, I think in that case, Jill, I'll add an item for some business arising out of the minutes. I don't know if that's the right category, but an action item is for the legislative assistant to provide us copies of the latest package B in particular, and then maybe an accompanying note that outlines the specific sections that address what Tom and I are talking about, so that we can all review it ahead of our next meeting, because really that's what we're going to start applying for to each of the applications that come forward. So we need to be retrained on that, but it starts out by getting documents and probably sending out a hard copy. Some of us would like it, maybe. I know I would. Maybe other people don't, but we'll put that as an action item here for you. Please identify who wants to hard copies versus who wants soft copies and have those sent to it ahead of the next meeting. Is that okay?
Yes,
You're right.
I think it's a good idea.
Oh, I want to make sure Jill's okay with it, though.
Good idea.
Yeah, no, I will get those
Okay.
together and touch base with Ben and get the hard copies out to you.
The hard copies. Okay, and then Ben, just a very short accompanying note that says these are the sections that you want that identify what you're talking about. Because right now we know it's like chapter 6, I think, section parts 1 to 7. I think that's what it is that we look at now. If you can tell us what it is, point us in the right direction. We'll look after it from there. Thank you. Next question. Okay, hypothetically, Ben, if a project just like the Kennard Block comes to the city now and they want to be built, am I right in saying that only the variances that they ask for will come to the committee for review?
Yes, that's correct. So major projects that don't involve a site plan variation can go forward through the as a right process.
Okay.
I think a big difference compared to downtown Halifax plan area is that there are so many things could be varied, including major things like setbacks, and that's something that's not or tower width, and that's something that cannot be varied under the package B framework.
So it's more restrictive in that case, because we know Kennard Block got away with a lot. In fact, a lot of big developments got away with a lot of variances that maybe should have been approved, maybe shouldn't have, but that won't be the case now. A lot of those things that got passed before, it's not an option. Is that right?
That's right. So when I point you to the land use bylaw, and it was on the summary side of my screen, there's only certain things that can be varied through site plan approval, and things like tower dimensions and setbacks are not one of them. Either there's built-in flexibility written into the land use bylaw, and there is some in some cases that if you're abutting certain situations, but otherwise, to build a bigger building that would normally permit it is not something that could be varied.
I don't mind saying that. I think that's a good idea. So it's good. And maybe that's why some of these applications, the 5 want to be reviewed under the old rules so they can get those variances. I know I've seen enough, but I know how they work. Supplementary report to council on September 14th of 2021 about Center Plan Package B. There was a request about, it doesn't matter, but in the discussion, it was about design review, and there was 2 other possible modifications to Package B. And one was expand the use of the site approval tool, or incorporate design review into the existing pre-application process. I think council's decision was to go ahead and make a change in Package B for one of these. And I'm curious where that ended up, or if anything was modified.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question and opportunity to clarify. So, as you pointed out, council were asking questions about the use of the site plan approval tool, and throughout the process, and leading to that question and that discussion. So what council ultimately decided was they chose not to expand the use of the site plan approval tool because, as I mentioned, it's kind of an all or nothing tool. We can't choose to involve a committee without all the other pieces that go along with it, including the chance including the opportunity for neighboring residents to appeal. So they chose not to go down that road of basically requiring site plan approval for a broader range of projects. But instead, what we have direction from council to do is establish a pre-application process where developers can submit high-level concept drawings earlier on, just to first of all see if they're meeting the land use bylaw requirements before they're putting in significant funds in the construction drawings. And as part of that, it's a process that we already have established for discretionary applications. As part of that, we suggested to staff that we can include at a staff level some high level, some early design advice as well. So, while a building might be able to be, for example, constructed in a certain way, maybe it's a high-rise building, that review could suggest, well, you know what, you could achieve better fitting with the neighborhood and actually achieve more floor area if we were to do more of a mid-rise form. So it's less of a checkbox, are you meeting the land use bylaw requirements, and more adding in some some advice it's voluntary advice that the developer may or may not choose to follow. So it's a new approach, building on some of our existing processes and some of the informal conversations we'll have with architects and developers about different projects, and formalizes that. So council, we're interested in giving it a try. So it is something we're putting into place, and we committed the council to return to them in 2 years' time after monitoring, to tell them how it went. You know, how many pre-applications that we actually received, and did it actually have an impact on design.
Okay, so this will be added to your process, which is sort of documented internally. And as I read this is not a public committee at all. It's only internal staffers and the developer, so we're not privy to what's going on there. But after a couple of years to find out if it was actually used by the developers, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We call it a pre-application process because it's not a requirement. It's entirely voluntary on the part of a developer, of an applicant, and because it's not part of the application process, it's somewhat similar to a development inquiry before an application is made. It has to be actually has to be kept confidential. It can't be an open public meeting.
Noted. Thanks, Ben. That's all of my questions. So I'll go to Sujana, and then Jesse had her hand up.
I have a few questions on the center plan package B, and specifically the landscape plan requirements section, chapter 5. One of the points in chapter 5, section 440(2)(c), it talks about the list of drawings we need to submit for a site plan approval. One of the items in there is planting areas and details of all new vegetation and ground cover, including location, quantity, size, and both common and botanical names need to be identified of all species and varieties. To generate the plant quantities, we would at least need to prepare a planting plan, which takes about a week for it to be developed. Is there a specific reason why the center plan is getting into the level of detail that is required in here? It's a question for Ben.
Yeah, thanks for your question. That might be one I need to respond back from the email after this meeting. I just wasn't I guess prepared to. It's not one I'm that familiar with. It was a requirement put in place through the package A process that would carry forward through package B. And the general intent of requiring a landscape plan is to make sure that it's a fairly common requirement throughout Canada for larger scale developments, is to ensure that it's essentially meeting requirements of the land use bylaw, and that there's thought into the types of plants and how they're going to be integrated in with development. But I think it's something I'll have to circle back to my team and get back to you about exactly what the intent is and the experience with it.
Okay. Usually when in the initial site plan approval before package A and B are implemented, we do develop site plan drawings that indicate the location of trees and areas that need to be planted. And I do understand the reason for asking us to specify the type of plants and varieties of species that we are using, but I think asking us to give the details of the quantity of planting that is being used in a specific project is a bit of a stretch, at least for a site plan approval stage, because these are the details that are developed further into the design development of the project. It's almost developed only before a tender drawing is completed. So, which has a lot of time between the site plan approval package and the tender issuing package. There's at least a few months gap between the two sets that will be developed. And another thing I noticed here is construction details for all hard landscape areas, including design specifications. Again, this is only developed at a tender stage, not earlier than that. And manufacturer specifications for all the furniture or any of the materials that are being used in the project. Again, all of these are a bit stretching, I would say, to ask for a site plan approval stage. Maybe all these details can definitely be submitted maybe after or during the tender process, but definitely not before that process. I think it's a bit of a stretch to ask any designer to develop all these details before that, because there's 100% chance that the planting area, the size of the planting area would change between the site plan approval and say a tender documentation process. And all the work that has been put to develop a particular plan will need to be revised because the area has changed and the developer had a change in mind to increase the planting area or increase the paving area, which would ultimately affect the planting. So I just wanted to know why these things are included in center plan packages for site plan approval. That too.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the question. I think as noted, I think I'm not prepared to offer an explanation at the moment, but I can follow up through Jill with a written response after checking with the team. The one thing I will note is that under a package B, the site plan approval tool is I think we've been discussing right now is only used for variations. So the requirement for a landscape plan would be part of the development permit process, which is, you know, at the point where the closer to when an applicant is ready to proceed for construction. So that might partially alleviate some of your concerns, but like I said, I think I'd have to look back and check with the team and get back to you on specifics.
Thank you. Jesse, thanks for your patience. You're up.
I'll bring it back to more discussion about our committee and the impact we're having moving forward. I want to recharacterize, I guess, what Alex said from my perspective. I see the effort from staff to kind of recharacterize this as our mandate actually growing and being more flexible, because now the geographic area is bigger and we're only commenting on variances, which are more fluid in their requirements. But the fundamental problem that we've talked about a bunch of times is that once the application comes to us, the staff have already decided that it is in the spirit of the requirement. So similarly now, even though only the variances are coming to us, someone has already decided that it is in the spirit, and we're just there to say whether or not we agree with that. And so that's one issue, and I don't know if that's resolvable. It might just be fundamental. I'm not sure. You know, you folks can give it some thought. But the second piece is that, and what I'm recharacterizing from Alice's comment is that I have no problem with this being an advisory body. I'm happy with that, but I've never been on or reviewed or engaged with in any way an advisory body where no advice was ever taken. And so everybody should be concerned about that. The city should be concerned about that. I should be concerned about that. We all should. Why am I spending hours of my time over years to just give a bunch of advice that never gets taken? It's not a good use of staff time. I think you all have way more important work to do. So if there's nothing we can do to encourage developers to take the advice, then I think just from an evaluation, like program evaluation perspective, like that we should just wrap this up. So those are my thoughts, and I will leave it.
Jesse, thank you very much. Any further questions for Ben?
Yes, may I?
Oh, Tom.
May I? I think I agree strongly with Jesse, and I think, Jesse, that is what was discussed at our last meeting, and that was not summarized in the minutes. The role and usefulness of this committee when our recommendations can be blown in the wind. Anyway, Ben, I have it has been raised here, but where is the role of within the city, if it's not in this committee, where environmental impact is looked at in buildings? Because you were working under Halifax 2050, but we never see any magnificently designed buildings that are moving a technology towards a zero carbon or zero energy use. That's one question. We have been told it's not relevant to our committee, but you are in the city, and I would like to know where are the buildings reviewed for energy efficiency and movement towards the HRM policy, which is the Halifax 2050. And my other question is, very often in the review panel here that Jill sent us, it is this is the responsibility of the development engineering group. What are the development engineering group, and what relevance do they have to the design? It seems to be when we pass comments on the street, i.e. outside the limit of the site, i.e. the sidewalks, the street tree planting, the street repairs. It says this is the responsibility of the development engineering group. But very often the developer will ameliorate his building by showing a line of street trees, which he is not responsible for planting. So I kind of wonder, there's two questions. Where in the city are we reviewing developments to move towards energy efficiency and the Halifax 2050? And what is the development engineering group? Your colleagues, what do they do and where do they come into the process? Okay. Second question.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting that on different roles, and some of the you know, we're as a municipal government, we work under the constraints of our provincial legislation. So when it comes to Halifax, it's not Aaron and Sean. It's not looking at from the development, what the building looks like and what the function of the building is. It's looking under the Nova Scotia Building Code. So it would be all our building officials that review buildings for energy efficiency, and that's something that is reviewed through the construction process, and it can actually, the materials can actually change depending on the approval of the building officials throughout construction. We had questions about trying to accommodate wood frame buildings or mass timber buildings with different design rules, but we couldn't connect how building construction was designed because there's just two different bylaws and two different systems. So under Halifax, actually, the team working on that are in discussions with the province for making changes to the Nova Scotia Building Code so that Halifax can require net zero buildings. It's not something we currently have the power to do, and it's not something that the land use bylaw will do. So just to answer your questions about energy efficiencies and under Halifax, that's the building code, and that group is looking at working with the province to enhance those controls and enable Halifax a bit more powers in that regard. The engineering group, they look at the approvals and requirements related to how a building generally interacts with a public street. They also coordinate other reviews related to Halifax water and other roads, but ultimately to get to a building, you need to have a driveway access. That driveway access needs to be safe. You might be encroachments into the public realm. Certainly review it in terms of impacts for construction as well. And also think things like the requirements related to the street trees, other things that might happen with the interface between a development and street, and of course becomes are very much involved when a development is proposing it's constructing potentially constructing a new street. Also goes through various reviews to make sure that the street is designed and meets all the municipal standards.
So so there is a relationship between the design, development engineering group and the developer. They decide what is to be done together for the area.
Well, whenever a project comes forward in the municipality, it's reviewed from a variety of different perspectives of different approvals are needed. So getting a permit for meeting a building design is one thing, but that building design also needs to comply with requirements for the driveway access. Is the driveway access proposed in a safe place, and that might impact the design of the building if it's not. Or do they need to, for construction purposes, do they want to or need to cut down a tree, and then they're prepared to reinstate it after construction is done? So there's lots of interactions between construction on a private site with how it impacts the public streets and other public spaces around it.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to call the discussion at this point. We'll move on. I'm going to say, Ben, thank you for sitting here and taking all of our questions and answering them. Appreciate it. I know might be a few things that you have to submit via writing, so we'll look for that.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I have a couple of action items on my end, so I'll sign off and have a great evening.
You too. All right, folks, we're going to move on to item 9.1.2. This is the plan approval application tracker. So this is something we talked about last meeting. We're all looking forward to seeing it. So you've had about 2 days to review it. And we've got Aaron and Sean here to talk about it. And so I think what I'll do is hand the floor over to Aaron and let her just introduce the document, and then we'll open the floor to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll have to give credit where credit's due. Sean did all the heavy lifting on this and the next consecutive agenda item and putting them together. It is our tracker as of the state of things now. If the committee has any questions, this is really just intended to it's a standing item where we're providing a running list of the applications and the statuses that we have, unless anybody has specific questions.
I had one question or two questions and some comments, but I want to let everybody else have their go first, please.
I can't hear Aaron very, very clearly. It seems very broken up, and
oh, she just wanted to. She said that she's
sure
just,
what she said.
She just said that they have it. They just finally prepared it. I think Sean did most of the work on this one. And so now it's finally ready for us to view, and she's opening the floor if you had specific questions about it or comments.
No specific questions, but I definitely appreciate the work. I think Jesse in the comments earlier kind of summed up the general thoughts on what, a lot of it came back with, we're not going to do it. So that brings us back to why are we here? The document's great, and it's nice to see a few little things here and there taken, but it definitely reinforces, I think, a lot of our points about our relevance as a committee.
Noted. Jonathan, anybody else?
Here, Jonathan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's particularly relevant in the building that we discussed at the corner of Gottingen and Cogswell. That's the major significant location, and I think it was very, very off-putting to see the developer saying, "Well, he will look at it and consider it." Anyway, but it did a lot of work, and thank you very much, Sean. It was it's good to see the complete usefulness of our tasks. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I wanted to say, also say thank you and say this is very valuable. That's a good record, and it should be added as something that's attached to our meeting minutes and the agenda going forward every time with updates, or at least a couple times a year. A question on the third column, which is the response. And it looks to me like these are all the applicants responding back to you, right? That this isn't our internal staff who have done this assessment. Is that right?
Some are actually both. Some are actually written comments. Some I had to look at the plans. And yeah, it's kind of a balance of both in the report.
And that's kind of what you're forced to do, really, to get
That's
the
what I
full
was
picture?
forced to do for
That's
the
what you're
earlier
forced to-
ones. The newer ones, we were a little bit better on those, and we were getting comments back from the developer on those.
Yeah, okay. I
And
think
some of them
what-
didn't apply for permit, so we didn't have plans in. That was the other difficulty.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah.
You know what what would be most useful for me is, you know, I look at this and there's like 12 applications that we did in about 14 months. It'd be nice if this was gone, I guess maybe by date. If it had the date of the DAC meeting in the tracking.
I can put that in.
And maybe if we took this and we said, on a recommendation by recommendation basis, accepted, partially accepted, or not accepted at all, or to be determined in a lot of these cases, because the building just, it's not far enough along. And I realize that this is like a lagging document. It's going to take a year or 2 years before we know for sure on some of these projects if they've been accepted. And it's easy to look at this. By my count, there's 67 recommendations. 11 have been either partially accepted or fully accepted. That doesn't look very good, but I know that I suppose there's a possibility that a bunch of these applications that once they're done, they might accept all of our applications, all of our recommendations. So the scoring system is what I suggest. And I might actually write it up and send it to you, Sean and Aaron, of how I'd recommend to do it. And I think this is be extraordinarily valuable to the members of the committee, as John said, it shows what the fruits of our labor, because we do put a lot of time in to reviewing these things and coming up with recommendations. And it's, if you can tell, if anybody's listened to any meeting for the last 14 months, you know that the people on this committee might say, what is this for? Are we really providing value to the city? Because the committee should be providing value of some sort. And judging on whether or not our recommendations are taken is probably the best way to determine whether or not we have provided any value. So thank you so much for this, and I look forward to continued updates. I think it can be refined a little bit, and I will send a few comments your way.
Okay, thank you. I do want to pass on one comment. I believe Ben's going to look into it on the landscaping, but I believe with the variations and where this was going, I think that was a comment from our division on the landscaping and the detail to go to the committee with a variation. I don't know if the landscaping, I'd have to look at the bylaw and check, and Ben's going to do that, but I think that was a comment to the center plan team, was when we come to the committee, you have expressed to us we want a complete package, a complete set of drawings. And a couple of times we've gone and it didn't go very well because it wasn't complete in the eyes of the committee and we had to come back. So that might have been a comment that came from us as a result of meeting with your group. Just I'll let Ben do his thing, but I was thinking about that after the comment, and I think that might have been something that was passed on to the center plan team. So.
Noted. The floor is still open. If anybody has any further questions on this or comments.
I have a question. I know that this tracker kind of came from our asking or like interest in knowing where our recommendations were going, but I'm curious from the city, like, are you happy with this? Like, were there success metrics in place when you set up the committee to say, you know, we want this committee to comment on X number of proposals and we hope that their advice will be taken in, you know, X percentage of situations? Or was it really just like, no, nothing else was considered except like things will go to the committee? And then, because I just felt I felt disappointed, you know, to see that so few recommendations were taken. So I'm just curious to know if this is good from your perspective.
The tracker is definitely good, and the tracker helped us through center plan package A to B. without a doubt. And that's, you know, to credit of the committee. We didn't have that, and you had asked for it. And now we used it to track them for our applications to make sure they're complete. What are we under, package A or B, and now the regional center bylaw. So absolutely, the tracker sheet, I feel that's very good for us. It's helped our department out and helped us work through the changes in legislation. As far as tracking it and keeping like the recommendations, that's fairly new. I know that was on the books for a little bit. We finally got that done. I don't have any, I think we'd have to run it for a bit and look at the data and see, but right now it's kind of our first attempt at it, having a look at it, and moving forward, hopefully that's the same thing. It mirrors the tracker and helps us, you know, review this later on. Or moving forward, maybe is a better way to say it.
I just think it's good to have a goal, so that everything that you're doing is, you know, we have a benchmark. Like, what are we hoping for? And it seems to me like it's going to require a bit of a culture change for the developers. And I think that direction would have to come from staff at any part in the process to say that, you know, we do want you to take these recommendations seriously, and we you know, we're happy when you do, and like that dynamic has to change, because right now it feels very almost like either we're at odds and we don't agree and we're just there, or the developers after are just like, anyway, we don't need to do this, and that tension, it doesn't feel productive to me.
Noted. Thanks, Jesse. Tom, go ahead.
Not putting words into Jesse's mouth, but Sean, I think Jesse was not asking, was the tracker valuable? I think she was asking, is the committee, the Design Advisory Committee, a valuable planning tool from your planning staff perspective when you set up this idea, and now you see it at work? Is it a valuable planning tool in helping to turn the city into a more useful and beautiful and functioning place? I'm not putting words into your mouth, Jesse, but I think that's what you're asking, not the tracker. It's just a tool. So your question is, you as planning staff feel the Design Advisory Committee is a useful planning tool in improving the city functionally and visually?
I would say yes overall. I think I struggled along with the committee at the start because it was new to me, and it was a new bylaw, and we were learning as we went. So that was tough, and we had to understand the bylaw and different perspectives on things. But some of those were very good, and we took those back. And I don't know, I think the committee is feeling like the recommendations weren't all used, but some things we just can't, under our land use bylaw, make requirements of a building, but certain things we can, and we can push for and move towards. So I think overall, yes, but I really feel like I agree with what Alex is saying. I think the variations will be more focused. I think we can have a good discussion about what they are and how they relate to the bylaw. And I'm looking forward to that side of things. And I guess we've got the bylaw set up now, so we agree with the development community on what is acceptable and what isn't. And if you want to go outside of that box, then we come to the committee and we have a discussion about it and what the parameters are around it. So that's my 2 cents on it. I guess I'll leave it to the group to have any comments on that.
Nothing else, Tom? Nope. Okay, I'd say Aaron and Sean, can you sent us the PDF version of this? Can you send me, I guess, the Word or Excel version, please?
Yes. Yes.
I'll make my so that I can make my modifications. I think would make it even more valuable to us, and perhaps to you. Okay, so we have a tracker. That's a big goal. Thank you. If I hear nothing else, I'm going to move on the agenda. All right. 9.1.3 Design Advisory Committee 2022 proposed meeting schedule. it's almost the new year, and you would have received an attachment with our meetings for next year. It's really no change from what we have now. It's the second Wednesday of every month. Has everybody had a chance to review? And has anybody have any comments? I'm hearing none, then I might say, can I get a motion to approve the 2022 meeting schedule as presented?
Second motion to approve.
Second.
I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right. It's passed. The meeting schedule is passed as presented. It's official. The next item was 9.1.4, which we have deferred to the next meeting. So it takes us to, we're almost done. Item 10, added items, there are none. Item 11 is our next meeting. I want to add a note here. The next meeting is Wednesday, January 12th. And of note, it is the first meeting of the calendar year. And so that means that there will be an election of the chair and the vice chair. I will not be putting forward my name for chair for next year. So there should be a new chair, and I hope that everybody who's involved here would give it consideration to be the chair or the vice chair. It's a very rewarding experience. And I think the committee has evolved so much that we're probably ready for a change in how the meetings are run. So I would look forward to there being a change. And so please, everybody, give it some thought, because there will be an election. Any comments? No. Hearing none.
Is there any reason why you're not running, Ted?
I'll discuss that after the meeting. Afterwards, I don't want to get into it right now.
Because I would like to that you are a superb chair. You know the technique. You have done it. You've only run a year, and most chairs would maybe do 2 or 3 years before they resign. But that is your. But I think all of us think you are a very good and extremely efficient and effective chairperson.
Nice compliment. Thank you, Tom. Okay. The last item is adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn? I saw Sarah. Sarah McDonald moves to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night and have a good holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you all very
Thanks, Dan.
much.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Okay. Happy